The Pope who died while committing adultery on a chair. Everything you think you know about papal infallibility is about to be violently corrected. 1. The corpse that changed history. What if I told you that on a sweltering August morning in 964 AD, a pope's naked body was discovered still impaled on a special chair designed for sin, his face frozen in a death mask of orgasmic agony? You don't learn this in history class because the Catholic Church spent 3 centuries systematically destroying every record, every witness, every piece of evidence. But the whispers survived, the kind of whispers that make cardinals cross themselves and reach for their rosaries. Pope John XII, born Octavian, the bastard son of a Roman senator, wasn't just corrupt, he was corruption incarnate. While your textbooks drone on about questionable morals, they conveniently omit how he transformed the Lateran Palace into history's most depraved brothel. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what happened on that chair, what you're about to discover, makes Caligula's excesses look like a Sunday school picnic. The chair itself was a masterpiece of perversion. Commissioned from the finest Byzantine craftsmen, it featured intricate carvings of satyrs engaging in acts that would make a modern pornographer blush. Gold-plated phalluses served as armrests. The seat cushion concealed a sophisticated system of pulleys and counterweights that could elevate, tilt, and rotate its occupant into positions that defied both gravity and decency. This wasn't furniture, it was a machine designed to facilitate the most elaborate sexual gymnastics imaginable. 2. The Pope who turned the Vatican into a whorehouse. But wait until you hear what happened before the chair. Because John XII didn't just stumble into depravity, he weaponized it. Picture this, it's 960 AD, and instead of leading morning mass, the Supreme Pontiff is hosting what chroniclers reluctantly described as the Feast of the Flesh. Nuns dragged from convents, married women whose husbands had been mysteriously murdered, even his own sisters and cousins, all forced to participate in orgies that lasted for weeks. The Lateran Palace's marble floors ran sticky with wine and other fluids. Contemporary accounts, the few that survived the purges, describe the stench as unbearable, like a charnel house mixed with a brothel wafting clear across the Tiber. The Pope himself would parade naked through these festivities, wearing nothing but his papal tiara, drunkenly quoting scripture while penetrating anything that moved. He particularly enjoyed deflowering virgins on the altar of St. Peter's, screaming, "I have authority over angels, so I certainly have authority over your virginity." His entourage included the most handsome young men of Rome, cardinals who weren't chosen for their piety, but for their willingness to participate in increasingly elaborate sexual performances. You think that sounds bad? We're just getting started. 3. The curse that started it all. Here's what textbooks absolutely won't tell you. John XII's downfall began with a cursed chair. Not just any chair, the Sella Porphyretica, an ancient Roman imperial throne he'd stolen from the Colosseum's underground vaults. This wasn't merely decorative. This chair had witnessed every depravity of the Caesars, absorbed centuries of blood and bodily fluids into its porphyry stone. The Vatican's own secret archives, the ones they deny exist, contain fragments describing how John believed the chair amplified sexual pleasure through dark forces. The craftsmen who'd installed it went blind within a month. The servants who cleaned it developed weeping sores that wouldn't heal. But John XII couldn't resist. He'd heard the legends that Emperor Tiberius had died on that chair during an act so obscene that even Roman historians refused to record it. For a man who'd already exhausted every conventional pleasure, this represented the ultimate thrill. The chair's surface was warm to the touch, even in winter. Those who sat upon it reported hearing whispers, ancient Latin promising unlimited power through unlimited debauchery. John XII, drunk on wine and his own invincibility, believed he'd found the key to eternal youth through sexual excess. He was half right. The chair would grant him immortality, but not in any way he'd imagined. 4. The woman who knew too much. The Pope's favorite mistress, Stephania, was no innocent victim. She was Rome's most notorious poisoner, a woman who'd already survived 3 husbands and countless lovers. But even she had limits. In her confession extracted under torture by John's successor, she described the final night with chilling specificity. "He'd been in the chair for hours," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. The usual crowd had left hours earlier, driven away by the things he demanded. The chair was moving, not just rocking, moving. The mechanisms inside were grinding like bones breaking. He wanted me to sit facing him to couple while he remained impaled on those golden projections. Said it would make him immortal, that the chair fed on the energy of our joining. But Stefania had seen the warning signs. The Pope's eyes had been bleeding for weeks. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, like parchment stretched too thin. His breath smelled of putrefaction, though he was still alive. The chair itself had begun to change its surface, developing what looked like veins, pulsing in rhythm with the Pope's increasingly irregular heartbeat. She tried to leave. He wouldn't let her. That's when she realized the chair wasn't just facilitating his perversions anymore, it was feeding on them. 5. The death that shook Christendom, August 14, 964. The eve of the Assumption of Mary, ironically enough. The Lateran Palace was unusually quiet. John's most debauched associates had been mysteriously absent for days. Some whispered they'd fled, others that they'd been absorbed by the chair's increasing hunger. Stefania's testimony becomes fragmented here, understandably. She describes returning to the palace that night. Summoned by a message, she later realized the Pope couldn't have written. His hands had become too deformed, the fingers twisted into positions that defied anatomy. The guards were gone. The usual sounds of revelry replaced by an ominous silence, broken only by a rhythmic creaking from the papal chambers. What she found defied description, but I'll try anyway. The chair had grown, not metaphorically, literally expanded, its porphyry surface now covered in what looked like throbbing veins. Pope John XII was impaled upon it, but not in any position that made physical sense. His body was arranged. Bent backward at impossible angles, his spine curved like a bow, supported only by the chair's golden projections. His mouth was open in a silent scream, but his eyes were rolled back in ecstasy. The worst part, he was still alive, barely. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, and with each breath, the chair seemed to pulse brighter, like a parasite gorging itself on his life force. Stefania ran. She didn't stop running until she reached the home of Cardinal Deacon John, her former lover, and collapsed in his doorway, babbling incoherently about the chair that eats souls. 6. The cover-up that took centuries. Here's where the Church's machinery of concealment kicked into overdrive. By the time the Cardinal and his entourage reached the papal chambers, John XII was dead, but the chair, that damned chair, had vanished, every trace of it. The only evidence anything unusual had occurred was the Pope's body, which was discovered in a far more conventional position, sprawled on his bed, apparently the victim of a stroke. But even in death, John XII's body told a different story. His skin was translucent as alabaster, his blood completely drained. His internal organs showed signs of advanced decomposition, though he'd been dead less than hours. His genitals were grotesquely swollen and discolored, bearing what looked like suction marks arranged in perfect geometric patterns. His final expression was one of such ecstatic horror that the embalmers refused to work on him, forcing the Church to bury him in a closed casket before rigor mortis had even set in. The official cause of death, apoplectic stroke brought on by excessive devotion to prayer and fasting. The reality. Every witness to that night's events either disappeared, died under mysterious circumstances, or took vows of silence so strict they never spoke again. Stefania herself vanished within weeks. Some say she fled to Constantinople, others that she was walled up alive in the catacombs beneath Rome, her mouth stuffed with holy relics to prevent her from speaking further. 7. The chair that keeps returning. You think this story ends there? It gets worse. Much worse. That cursed chair has resurfaced throughout history, always in the hands of powerful men who believe they can control its power. Urban VI reportedly used it during the Western Schism, though his enemies claimed he died screaming that the chair was eating him from within. Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, was rumored to have commissioned a replica, though his death was equally grotesque, his body bloated beyond recognition within hours of his final prayer session. Even in modern times, the whispers persist. Vatican insiders speak of a special throne in the private papal apartments, one that's never photographed, never shown to visitors. A chair that certain popes have been drawn to during times of crisis, seeking the same dark power that corrupted John XII. They say Benedict XVI's sudden resignation was connected to his discovery of this relic. They say Francis refuses to enter certain rooms of the papal palace because he can hear the chair calling. The Cella Porphyretica wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a doorway, an ancient Roman instrument of control that learned to feed on human depravity. And like any predator, it adapted. It evolved. It learned to hide in plain sight, disguised as history, waiting for the next powerful man arrogant enough to believe he could master what the Caesars couldn't. 8. The warning written in blood, everything you think you know about papal infallibility, about the sanctity of the Vatican, about the separation between church and the darker appetites of power, it's all a carefully constructed lie. John XII wasn't an aberration. He was just the one who got caught, whose death was too public, too grotesque, too impossible to explain away completely. The next time you see a photograph of the Pope on his throne, remember John XII. Remember that some chairs aren't just furniture, they're predators. Remember that power doesn't just corrupt, it attracts the kind of darkness that feeds on corruption, that grows stronger with each depraved act committed in its name. And remember this: somewhere in the Vatican's hidden archives, in rooms that don't appear on any architectural plans, that cursed chair is still waiting, patiently, hungrily, because power never really changes. It just finds new vessels, new excuses, new ways to satisfy ancient hungers. The Pope who died while committing adultery on a chair, his story isn't history, it's prophecy. And somewhere in Rome, right now, another powerful man is probably sitting in another chair, feeling it warm beneath him, hearing whispers in a language that died with the Caesars, believing himself strong enough to control what consumed John XII. Wait until you hear what happened to the men who tried to destroy that chair. But that's a story for another time.